Now I must live with the light.
Merhaba, iyi günler. Nasılsınız? Çok iyi mi? Şöyle böyle? That exhausts pretty much of... The only other Turkish I know that I use all the time is hangi takım. But there are too many of you. So, a pleasure to be here, first of all, at YEDİ Istanbul with great friends, Mehmet Gurs and Cemre Narin and others. And we've been able over the past number of years to share parts of their journey and our own journeys here. So it's really like a tremendous pleasure and honor to be here talking at YEDİ Istanbul in lovely Sabancı Museum by the lovely Bosphorus. So I'm normally a fiction writer. I write sort of surreal, brief, funny fiction. But I also wrote recently a memoir called Mess, One Man's Struggle to Clean Up His House and His Act. And what does it have to do with extinction? This. If I could retitle the book, I would call it Mess, on the Power of Objects and Memories and the Pain of Letting Go. Pain almost to the sense of extinction, and pain involving the loss of memories. So, why did I decide to write this book? I thought I'd begin with a bang. Very briefly, background, my girlfriend and I, Anya, live in New York and here. We have two apartments, her place where we do our living, and my place, which was her old apartment, which I use as a writing studio, and I keep my stuff there. And at a certain point a few years ago, I realized my place had become very, very cluttered and disorderly. And I did not want anyone to come inside. And then one day she showed up at my door and wanted to come inside. I wouldn't let her. She got angry. Then she peeked behind me and was shocked and fed up and said, okay, you need to clean up your house and your act or else. So I thought a bit, but what I really did was stall. Yeah? And then I decided the way to do this was to turn it into a project. A writing project, I would write a book about the experience of it, and an art project, I would document it, and I would talk about myself, I would do an examination of my life, an accounting, and then I would explore the wider world of objects in the world. I would go to decluttering groups, I would speak to professional declutterers, I would speak to professional psychologists, I would talk about what was going on in my own psychotherapy, I would go visit hoarders, and I would do an accounting of my own personal history. So, the book is about objects, as I say, and the power of objects. So let's say this right off. The difference between someone who is a hoarder, who has a çöp evi, someone who has a clutter problem, a lot of disorganized stuff, blah, blah, blah, and someone who collects, who loves objects, is that a hoarder cannot let anything go. To the point where if you go in and intervene with someone who clearly has a house where you say, my God, how can you live like this? It's not healthy, it's not safe, blah, blah, blah, you can't have anybody here. People will commit suicide. Documented, completely documented. And what happens is that people who hoard have a connection to objects, as soiled and stupid and trashy as they seem to be, that connects deeply to them, not only to their identity, but to their sense of a structure in the world. It is one of their ways of coping with being in the world. And if you go in and intervene forcibly, you actually destroy them. That's what they feel. So a person with clutter issues, who's very disorderly, who can, who his house is a big mess, those people, if you can get them to start throwing things out, to part with things, difficult as it may be, they're not really hoarders. Collectors are deeply attached to things, but they have two-way traffic with their items, yeah? They can say, oh, I love this item, but this is a better one that fits with my collection, so I'll trade you this for this. A hoarder never trades. All the traffic is one way. Objects come in and they never go out. It's a very difficult condition to improve if you need to improve it. Drugs don't work. I mean, the society is totally over-medicated anyway, but let's just say drugs don't work. What seems to work is some kind of peer pressure, peer group where people sit and exchange and go through a monitored set of activities that have been set up by a psychologist and other people who suffer that way. So let me begin. So I launched myself onto this project of decluttering and exploring the world. So I got into problems very quickly because I started looking at my cluttered place as a kind of an art installation. So there was a wonderful, crazy Italian artist named Piero Manzoni who would do things like sign the world or sign his signature on someone's body and say, this is my artwork. So I decided I would put my signature here and say, this is my artwork. I at one point even thought, you know what? I'll treat it as a genuine art installation. I'll invite people to tour it, no touching. Because one of the things often with people with cluttered things and with hoarding things, I consider myself on the cusp, is that you don't touch things. And it's funny, here I am standing in front of several hundred people showing pictures of things that for me were so shameful and disorderly that I didn't want even those intimate and dearest to me to come in. But the transforming power, one of the ways of holding on to experience, of not losing experience, is to write about it or to make art about it, or in the certain case, document it with photographs. And I became so obsessed with that, I thought, well, I would not touch things that needed to be cleaned up because I thought it made a great picture. So at a certain point, my making a project of decluttering interfered with my decluttering. So at a certain point, I thought, you know what, I'm going to have to do non-project decluttering, just off the record. And this is a photographer who worked with, who took wonderful pictures of people's places that were cluttered and so forth. And she came in and, you see what I collected. I collect souvenirs, knickknacks. I brought this out on stage because this is the sort of thing I love and will take back with me. And whenever I see this in New York, I will think YEDİ, and I will remember what the experience was like. So in many ways, even like little knickknacks are like dehydrated versions of memory. That if I suddenly, the house looks like just scattered with the stuff, but each time I see an object, if I just concentrate on it, it blooms into a whole memory. And you can say, well, you still have your memories, you don't need all these things out, you don't need to keep all of them. But if I hid them out of the way, my eye would never catch them. So what I have here is, the trouble with this obviously is that one becomes overstimulated. You live in an environment which has just tremendous resonances. What I discovered at the end of, I'll give it away, my thinking went, as I did this project, to finally thinking this: whatever the range of problematicalness is, there are certain people in the world who really love objects more than other people love objects. And there are certain people in the world who can tolerate disorder more than other people can tolerate disorder. There are certain people in the world who are more sentimental than other people are. And there are certain people in the world who don't mind a little dust. And other people say, and I'm a neat person. I just ran into this intense phase. And what I showed you at the beginning was when things had gotten very bad. And why had they gotten very bad, I realized? One of the things that makes people who have this tendency, let's say, to start hoarding, where things get out of control, is in response to trauma. People who hoard, who are much generally older and more intelligent than just the normal general population. They're not just crouched behind cranks behind grimy windows, not at all. They're very sensitive to objects and associations. But they report more trauma in their life. And one of the responses of hoarding is like nesting to protect against the memories of trauma. And I'd had something like that happen to me, and it's triggered off memories of my mother's death, which had been very difficult for me. And I realized suddenly I could not throw away cardboard boxes. They just seemed to pile up. It's classic. I couldn't throw away plastic grocery bags, the most evilly disposable thing in the universe, just piled up in my house. And I would reach to throw it away, and something in me said, that will make me less secure if I throw it away. But I'm happy to say it took a long time. The project I thought would be over in a year and a half. It took 3.5 years. But the cumulative experience of speaking to people, of going to peer groups, of opening up, and my girlfriend helping, got me going, okay, so this is what it looked like finally. And you see little Turkish memories there, yeah? Well, that's right. You're too kind. And the other thing I had to do for the project was to cook a meal for my girlfriend, which was a bit of a challenge because at the beginning my kitchen looked like a bombed out area. Not that bad, but close. And my girlfriend is a award-winning food writer, and her mother came to dinner also, and she's an accomplished chef. So this is me, and I will say that the dish I cooked was actually very good. It was a penne with country ragu from Bon Appetit online. And my girlfriend's mother paid me the ultimate conflict. She said out loud to Anya's scandal shock, she said, I prefer your pasta to Anya's pasta. There's a lot of treachery in Russian families. So I just want to say, this person here is named Langley Collier, and he's a pair of brothers, the Collier brothers, who are the most famous hoarders in New York history. They are the people that are cited as, when there's a hoarding, they had like 30 tons of rubbish stuffed into their house in Harlem. It was amazing. In doing the project, I suddenly found photographs, me, there, that look exactly like Langley Collier. I was researching in the archives at Columbia University, and I think I swore. I went, oh my God, Jesus! So I just want to say, there's a haunted element to this too, no? Okay, so this is me going along. This is not my place. This is me going along on a cleanup of an elderly man who was a hoarder. And I went with this group here are called Disaster Masters. And the leader of them is this old dude who is the most foul-mouthed person you ever heard in your life. But anyway, so other writers with clutter issues, I just wanted to touch base on it. This is Ryszard Kapuscinski, the great Polish travel writer. This is what his conditions are like where he works. He's not a hoarder, he just tolerates this sort of stuff. I contacted his biographer and I said, may I send you pictures of my disorder and see how it compares to Mr. Kapuscinski's disorder? He said, okay. So I sent him the pictures. He said, oh my God, yours is much, much worse. No. This is a famous paper hoarder. This is Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway, the master of the stripped down sentence, right, was a paper hoarder. He could not let anything go that was paper. So he had magazines just stacked. He had what's typical for a hoarder. He had valuable things, documents, checks, whatever, mixed in with old birthday cards, with old hunting licenses, with outdated stuff, because it was on paper and he hung on to it. And this is taken in his finca, his ranch house in Cuba, which we visited. It didn't look this way. He was a collector too, but people who visited him, the stuff has just come out recently, and I wrote a piece about it after my book came out. He collected, he was among stacks of stuff. This is Marcel Pravi in Vienna, who is the leading opera critic in Vienna. And he stored all his extensive operatic archives in plastic shopping bags. One of which, I don't know if you can see it here, is a shopping, it's called Bila. And we were in Vienna. As an homage, I bought a Bila shopping bag to have around. So you can have fun with hoarding, yeah? This is Johannes van Dam, who was the most eminent Dutch food writer. He was the great encyclopedist of Dutch cooking, a wonderful man. He used to be a bookseller. So this is his house. You can see a bit oppressive. This is his kitchen. This doesn't even begin to communicate how crowded it was. And I asked that guy, his assistant, I said, is it a little claustrophobic in here? And he said, are you kidding? So, the Museum of Innocence, Orhan Bey here, I wanted to show this because Orhan Bey is more of a collector, but you can see, I think, what's interesting about the museum is the obsessionalness of it. This is obsessive. These are the cigarettes supposedly collected by the character in his novel Museum of Innocence. These are the cigarettes smoked by the girlfriend that the narrator was hopelessly in love with. Yeah. What's obsessional is this. These are all plastic, and his assistants had to empty cigarettes and then Orhan Bey didn't do that. But what he did do is he wrote the notes under each of those. And this is what the museum looks like. If you go to the museum, you should go across the street. It's Cukurjima, it's the antiques area, and this is a shop called The Works. And what it is it gives a raw version of what's in the Museum of Innocence. So to visit the two together, I think, is really instructive. This is fantastic because you can see movements of interest through here, but you have a sense of being consumed by objects. I'm going to hurry through here because I don't say. This is me sniffing the roses at Freud's house. Freud was a collector. This is Freud's desk. This is where he worked. Look, there's barely room. These are the statues he used as a chorus. This is the UK's most extreme hoarder I went and hung around with. His name is Richard Wallace. He lives outside London. This is what his house is. It's a slightly fetish. It used to be up to the ceiling. When I visited, this was the height of it. When the documentary started on him, it was all the way up to the ceiling. He's collected cars. He was a big car person. And he had 18 cars on the property, like this. And I said, Richard, Neden. And he said, what? Huh? He thought, well, the parts can be used for blah, blah, blah. So there's this whole way of looking at things. You go like, dude, okay, you understand the idea. But a charming guy. I want to show this, and then I want to leave with one thing. So I'm going to run a minute or two over. This is what we're faced with in this culture. This is the Oprah Winfrey show, okay? This is the web page for Oprah's Winfrey's show. It's all about hoarding over there. See, she had a hoarding psychologist, David Tolan, on talking about what's hoarding. In the middle of that thing, there's a pop-up ad that says, splurge on you and your home. All right, I'm going to end with something topical. I'm just delighted. I met the guy who wrote Blade Runner, Hampton Fancher. I met him at a party back then. So I went and he did the new Blade Runner 2049. So I went and looked at Blade Runner again. I took it out. And there's a speech that Rutger Hauer, who's the replicant, who's about to expire, gives that talks about the loss of memory. And it's a minute long. Here it is.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time. Like tears in rain.
Teşekkürler.